Welcome, everyone. This is Laura Beck with the Eden Alternative. We are so glad that you are back with us today for part 2 of Home is Where the Med Cart Isn't. Excited about the new twist on the topic that you're going to experience today. I see that we have folks furiously joining the system, and we'll give them a chance to do that, but we're going to continue doing our introduction. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the title screen and just give you a little information again about how to engage with our system. Please make sure that you check the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. You have some tools there through the Zoom system. One of them is a Q&A box. If you click where it says Q&A, and you'll see a little box with a Q on it, open that up, pop it open, keep it open for yourself during the event. Gives you an opportunity to type your questions in as they arrive in your brain, which is the best time to make sure that they go somewhere and they're ready to be answered. That way you won't forget them. And we like having some questions that are ready to go when we're ready to address Q&A toward the end of the event. So make sure that you do that. We do have all of you muted on the system in our webinar platform, and prefer that you communicate with us through that Q&A box if you have any questions. If you are interested in applying for CEUs, the way that we do that is we ask that you stay until the very end of the event. You are there from start to finish, and we'll put a screen up at the end with some very specific instructions on what you're going to need to do in order to get those CEUs. So make sure that you make it possible for you to take that step. So that is where you will find out what you need. With that, I think we have everything covered. You know how to communicate with us. Please sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. And Denise, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Laura. Hey everyone, I'm Denise Hyde, community builder with the Eden Alternative. I am a pharmacist by background, but a elder care, person-directed care enthusiast by passion. And I'm excited to be back here with our panelists again today. So I want to reintroduce from Sem Haven Retirement Community in Milford, Ohio, Celia McGee, who's worked in long-term care as a nurse for 33 years. Wow. She has worked in staff development. She's been a charge nurse, a supervisor, and as I understand it, right now today she's working in her role of as primary instructor and coordinator of nurse aid training. It sounds like she's had a fun day with them today. She's also was involved with the Joint Commission certification that Sem Haven did, and helped them apply for national quality awards and at both the bronze and the silver levels through the American Healthcare Association. So way to go, Celia. And then Connie Dubois. Started off as an RN and then started off as an LPN and then became an RN, and she has been practicing nursing for 42 years. Holy cow. She is currently the nurse leader of the memory care household. She's responsible for electronic charting system, and she coordinates the MDS materials and questions and stuff for elders in their home, which includes managing their care plan. So she has extensive experience in working with all of the same kinds of things that you all work with. And then I also would like to introduce from Proximity Systems, Steve Reinecke, who is the Vice President of Business Development and Senior Care. And he works directly with providers and owners on really customizing medication storage solutions. He has a medical background, healthcare IT, and sales management background. He has a really unique perspective on the elder care business, if you will. And he works directly with the administrators and designers on making sure that they have in-room medication solutions that works for them, but he also educates people on the advantage of a more personalized and dignified approach to medication management. So I'm excited to be back with you guys again today. Everybody on the call, we did send you a handout yesterday. And so I want to make sure that you've got this. So what you should be seeing is a handout that says Home is Where the Med Cart Isn't. I emailed this out to everybody yesterday. I am hoping, beyond hopes, that you all got a copy and you printed it off. And this is based on what we call the growth model. So at the Eden Alternative, we are all about ongoing growth throughout life. For us, that is our principle number 9. And the idea is that we never stop growing. So we took that principle and created what we call a process improvement approach called growth. And every letter in growth stands for a step in a 6-part conversation. So we believe that you start off by just getting real, getting a sense of what is happening today, right now, around whatever issue or challenge you might be working on, and you get really good at current reality around that. So we call it the G, or the get real. And then we're going to talk about the R, or reach out, which means that even though you've got a small group of people usually who are kind of assessing current reality and seeing what's going on, until they reach out and get other people's perspectives into the conversation, it's hard to get a full picture of what's going on. So that's why that second step is in there. So yes, you can get real, but you should also be reaching out and gaining other people's perspectives, so you really build this really great picture of what's going on and why whatever solution you need to come up with is important and why it needs to happen now. So it's kind of like creating the business case, if you will. Then you got to bring that team together, and they need to open up and dream. Set the big goal of where you want to go and what that wants to be about. And then you got to work up a plan. That's the W, because like a dream without a plan, it's kind of hard to get there. And then a plan without action doesn't work. So the T stands for taking action. And then the H stands for, like, now that we've got a new idea in place, a new solution, a new approach in place, how are we going to hold steady and not backslide, but actually keep ourselves where we are so we can push further ahead? So it's the hold steady and reach further part of the model. So the handout's meant for you guys to take notes as we go along. If you want to ask questions, you are welcome to do that. And our intention is to kind of walk you through the questions on the page and the things that we wrote down. And I'm really hopeful that you can take all of this and convert it into a performance improvement project. So if getting rid of the med card is what you guys want to do, through our discussion and what we have posted here, we're going to kind of help you walk through all the things you want to think about if you want to move from your current med cart system into an individual in-room storage solution for the medications. So we're all going to take turns going through that handout with you and going and talking about why these particular questions are on here and why we think that they are important. So we're going to get real. That's where we're going to start. And I'm going to ask, I don't know if it's Celia or Connie that wants to speak first, but you know, the first question I think that's important is that, like, you get the why. Why do we want to make this change? And why is that an important question to start with?
I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Celia, and I think Connie and I feel very strongly that when you are starting the change, that you make sure that you include others in your vision and make sure that they understand what it is that you're working towards, and allow them to be in the process and maybe connect and be a person who would question your thought process and make sure that you thought about all the things that need to be done. And I think that it's really hard when you don't include all your major players, because you're not going to get the buy-in to allow that change to maintain its steadiness. And I think you'll find that people will be so overwhelmed and not engaged that they'll be pushing and pressuring you to go back to what it was before. So I think that it usually starts out with one person's vision. I know for us, we were making lots of changes about the time that we decided to move the medicines into the resident or the elder's room. And so our leaders went out and looked at what others were doing. And I think that's a big first step. But before that happens, you need to have discussions and conversations about, why would this be important? Why do we want to do this? Mm-hmm. What would be the advantages? What might it look like? And certainly it needs to be primarily at the level where the people that are going to be implementing it or have a large major part in making sure that it's successful, that they get involved, and early on, not when you've already decided, well, we're going to do this way and that way, and it's like, whoa, okay, you know, I wasn't really involved. And so your resistors are going to come out, and you want to get the people who question things too. I think that it's important to get those people involved that might be your naysayers later, because I think they'll be your biggest seller points if they're involved.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, Celia. Connie, anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I wanted to add too that when we first had the vision that we wanted to get the medicines out of the med cart, the big, huge med cart, and into the resident rooms, is that we wanted to make our home exactly that, a home, and not institution. The big, huge med cart just wasn't a part of that. And so we needed to find a way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our whole goal, was to, you know, instead of having everybody's pills on a cart, why not do it like you do at home? You know, you have a little cabinet or whatever to put your medicine in. So that's why we did it.
There you go. See, you know the why. I like it.
I wanted to add something too at Celia again. We had a lot of, we had some organizations help us in the beginning of our culture change. We had a company called Action Pact, and they spent a lot of time with our employees. And I think that was one thing that may have set the groundwork, or at least began the process of deciding, how did we want to make this our own? How did we want to make this philosophy of care something that was our own? And so we looked at almost everything that we did, and our processes to try to determine how we wanted our culture to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because though someone tells you, oh, no, we can't have the med carts. No, you need to have the buyout. You have to buy from the staff. They have to understand why. They have to see what you're talking about. You have to show them what it is you want to do and how you want to do it, so that they can begin to say, let me think about that. You know, because there's Connie and I were talking at one point about the med cart was kind of a security blanket. And when we said, okay, we're not going to have a cart anymore, it's like, what?
Yeah. Even
though no one really wanted to push it around, and everybody thought it was huge, and, you know, all of that, it's still, you know, when you started taking things and saying, well, where are we going to put this? And what are we going to do with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that the why is really an important place to start. Yep. Steve, anything you want to add, or no? Okay. All right.
I think we're good.
Okay, yeah, so begin with the why, and the thing I've heard about the why, I'll just add one more comment, is that you need to speak not only to people's heads, but you need to speak to people's hearts, because the people that serve the elders are people with very, very big hearts, and so you also need to speak to the emotional part of them as well as the logical part of them, so that why is really important. And then the second thing that we put down, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So I did think of one thing. One term that we constantly that we hear about is this term household model. We're going to a household model, and the facilities that I've worked with, especially one in particular, they had 133 elders that they were dealing with, and they decided to just go to this household model, and they used the term very openly, and they realized the term household and the med cart just did not work, because if they're going to be utilizing this household model, how can a med cart actually work within that? And that's one of the reasons why they specifically looked at the individual residents' medication storage.
Okay, good story. So while I got you, Steve, we're going to just move on. You said one of the important things that you think in terms of getting a sense of current reality is maybe do a time and motion study. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think so we've done time and motion studies. So looking at your current processes and looking like how many steps are your care partners actually using to deliver those meds, and look at and then mock it up. Say, okay, let's just pretend for a second here. And they would do this in the evenings when the elders were sleeping, and they would do their little sort of mock walking around and had their pedometers. And this was pedometers at the time, not, you know, previous to the entire Fitbit. And they looked at their steps and how many steps they were actually doing. And they saw over a 50% reduction in the amount of travel and steps in this in resident model, in elder model, and in cabinet. So, you know, there's, and it also came down to how they were stocking their meds. You get into some scenarios where they still have their med room, and they're dispensing from the room onto the cart, and then the cart and was their delivery vehicle, where others were, you know, the cart was their storage as well as their delivery vehicle. What they were finding was when they were doing using the cart as a delivery vehicle, we, in our time and motion study, we saw a reduction of over 70% of steps, because they realized how often they've either forgot something or don't have something, and then they push the cart all the way back because they weren't allowed to be carrying the meds with them. They had to be on an actual delivery vehicle. So that step reduction allowed them to spend more time doing other things.
Which I assume includes building relationships with the elders they serve.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So yeah, time and motion study. And I don't know, Connie or Celia, did you guys ever kind of look at that, whether or not it was more motion, more stress, more steps, more time? Have you ever done a comparison?
We noticed that after we did do it, this was after the fact, that the nurses do have more time to spend with the elders. They just do. For some reason, that taking the medicines out of their med cart and putting them in their room where they are, you're spending more time with them.
Nice.
It just works.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's an important thing to consider. So getting a sense of current reality, how many motion steps, time, how much is involved in that, really important. And then I know Team Seven Haven, you also looked at the numbers and types of meds that were being given. You were kind of assessing size of bottles and all that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I think that one of the things that I noticed that we have divided our medication times into tasks. Like morning might include 3 or 4 hours worth of time. So I think that was one of the big things, that maybe we have more time because we tried to take our medicine and put them into time frames so that our elders could arise, you know, they could wake up and get their medication upon arising, rather than putting them into 1 hour before or 1 hour after the time it was due. So I think that we cut down a few things. I think one of the things that in this section on the number of types of meds, that I think it is very important when you're designing your system that you know what kinds of medications and what containers they're going to be packaged in, so that you know that you have a system that can fit the things that you have. Our car workstation on wheels is where we store our narcotics, or the majority of our narcotics, and we had to make sure that the cards that the pharmacy supplies our medicine on would fit in there. And we allow our elders to get their medication from a variety of sources, so we had to look at that too. Meds from mail order and retail and our own pharmacy, and so there was lots of different types of packaging. Was that all going to fit into this cabinet that we developed?
Absolutely. So just an assessment of how much space are we going to need. Yeah. Connie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, we have people who bring in medications for their loved one, supplements, vitamins, Sam's, for instance, or Walgreens, or one of those, buy one, get one free, and the families will buy 1,000 calcium with vitamin D and bring them in. Well, we had to have space for that. So the cabinets, we had to take that into consideration, you know, that we want them to be able to provide that because that's what they've always done for their loved one. And we did not want to take that away from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was a big consideration with, you know, the size, the adjustable shelving or whatever. That's a big issue. And, you know, we don't have everybody's pills coming from the same place, which would be nice, but it's not right for our people who live here.
Yeah. 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 Steve, anything you want to add about just being aware, you know, in part of getting real, the numbers, types, size of bottles, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to testing everything and making sure that what you're getting in and do it. Don't rely on pictures of cabinets and measurements because they're not always right. So getting the cabinet into the community, getting it mounted on the wall, and making sure everything fits. So that worst case scenario, making sure your liquids are separated from your solids, and understanding that this is a workstation, and that's one thing is the users are going to be very used to having a large work surface. That medication cart is, you know, that security blanket like we talked about, but it's also, you know, it's usually cluttered, but there is space. There's space there for them to do their prep, and having making sure that the cabinet allows for, if they're going to go full cabinet, that there is an actual fold down work surface so they can do their pill crushing. They can have an area to do their prep, maybe to put, if they're using a iPad or any type of, you know, digital MAR, to put that down, because you don't want to be putting that down somewhere else and, you know, twisting around and doing different things. You want everything in front of you. So those just making sure everyone understands that the cabinet is a significant change, and you can't make assumptions.
Nice. And we have a question in the question box, and I'm going to ask Jane, who put that in there, if she would just be a little patient with us. The thing that happens is that when you are putting in in-room medicine cabinet solutions, there are so many things that you need to think about in terms of all of the processes of administering medications. And so as we go through the G and the R, if you just be patient, we may get to your answer, because we're going to talk about the things you want to be thinking about that could prevent you from needing to have a workstation on wheels, which is what the team at Seven Haven has. Because of their process and their journey and the way they went around it, the way they went about putting the meds in the elder's room, that's just the solution that worked for them. But is it possible to get to completely no cart at all? It might be, but it's going to take you asking some really important questions. So hang in there with us, Jane, and I'm going to come back and check on you after we're through the R and just make sure that we've got your question answered. So another thing that you're going to see under the Get Real, remember, this is usually like the administrator, the director of nursing, maybe a couple of culture change champions. It's not everybody usually that's getting real, but there's usually a few people. So they got to have their why. Why do you want to do this? Look at time and motion. How much time are we spending giving meds via the med cart? Because like that nurse is attached to it all day long. So it takes a lot of time. How much steps is she making to get it to all the different places, or he that needs to go? And then think about the number of meds, how many controlled substances are being used, and how many elders does that impact? Are they have multiple ones, just one or two? Is it patches? Is it long acting? Is it short acting? Are we going to have PRNs? We got to have double locked. We got to be thinking about all those kinds of things. And then they talked about the size of the packaging and making sure the cabinet's going to fit that. Another thing that I've heard people talk about when they get into this kind of the question number 3 on your handout, is to think, is this also an opportunity as we're thinking about taking meds out of the med cart and putting them into the elder's room? Do they really need that medication? And is that a conversation we want to have while we're doing this process? So is this going to be an opportunity for us to look at overall medication use and how we might reduce it? So that's part of the sub questions under number 3. And then the total number of med passes. Think about that. Because sometimes we have, we have to give this pill or this eye drop at 5 a.m. And then we've got this other one we got to give at 7 a.m. And then we got this because we got to have it an hour before breakfast. And then we got this other thing that needs to be given at 10 a.m. because it's got to be 1 to 2 hours after breakfast. And we have all these oddball medication times. So another thing about getting real is how many of those different times do we have? How many meds could we try to get to really small number of med passes? In our home, it was trying to get down to 2. So how many of the meds can we push to morning and bedtime and not have very many outliers in between? So that as we're helping the elder get up in the morning, they get their meds. As we help them go to bed at night, they get their meds. We have med aids in Nebraska. It worked for us. But that's where we were headed with it. So that's something also as you're getting real. How many different med passes do we have? And can we squish them? And if we squish them, are we going to have 2 or 3 souffle cups full of pills that the person has to take, or just 1? Are we jamming up so many medications that they're going to be eating breakfast by taking their pills? So you have to think about that too. So that's all part of getting real. It's just realizing how would that work to move to twice a day or even 3 times a day med passes, so that we weren't interrupting the elder through their daily routine, and we could be more about natural awakening and going to bed when they want and them doing whatever they want during the day, and we're not interrupting them. So just being aware of that. And then the documentation process. So Team Semhaven, your documentation kind of involves you have a laptop, right? Or a bigger computer that needs to go with you, right?
We do. We have electronic MAR. So we take a laptop, which is on the workstation on wheels with us, with the MAR listed in front of us, take it right outside the elders' rooms, and go in and the medications are in their room, and we have the workstation there right in front of us, where we can do the med prep and also sign off for our medications after we give them.
Yeah. So you guys will remember we showed the picture of their med cabinets, which don't have a shelf or something to do a prep area. So that's another reason why their journey ended with a workstation on wheels and the documentation and having to carry a laptop, because you can imagine having to carry a laptop from room to room to room, and finding a place to sit it safely, to work on it, that can get really, and it needs to be charged every now and then, and so that can get really challenging.
And it's also a compromise, because the med carts were huge. Medications for 20 people for the household is a lot. It's big. It's kind of overwhelming for the elders that live here, whereas the workstation is very small, yet it has the supplies on it that the nurses need, the pill crusher, the AccuCheck machine, the vitals, but it's not overwhelming, and it's not like a barrier between the nurse and the elders.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I have heard some people say that they can get the MAR on a tablet. So I have seen some of the technology has advanced now to where, you might just be carrying an iPad or a tablet of some sort with you, which would be very different than carrying a couple pounds of laptop with you.
Yes, that's true. Very true.
So your technology influences whether or not you need some other little assistive thing.
And also, I've heard that it is possible to pull up your MAR on a cell phone.
Sweet.
So yeah.
There we go.
Technology.
So where you are on that journey of technology might make a difference for you too. So, so you want to think about the documentation, and if you're still using paper MARs as we were, and you got the big old Cardex, that's a whole nother problem of going room to room. So that document, get real. What is our documentation process? Can we make it work with in-room cabinets, and what would that involve? So that's part of getting real as well. And then thinking about what do we have in terms of processes to ensure the safety and security of the meds? What are we doing today? So Steve, you were going to kind of speak to kind of the things you've seen when you've worked with different providers.
Yeah, I guess depending on the different communities that we've worked with, they have their med cart under lock and key. And they need to find a key somewhere, or the med cart is physically in a room that's also under lock and key. So they're trying to keep that safety and security of the meds in consideration. The electronic locks now that you can get on cabinets have a lot of intelligence built into them, and they allow that you don't need a key anymore, and you can assign different pins to different people or different roles within the community, so that they can have access, and you can go back and pull a audit trail and see how many times the cabinet was open and what pin number was used. Keys get lost, right? Do you go around and rekey every single cabinet because of a lost key? Because normally they're all keyed alike. So having that ability to have it electronic, very easily change a pin and have that safety and security within that area. Plus, let's say you do have some sort of security issue with your meds. In a med cart, they gain access to it. They gain access to a lot of meds. When you're now putting it in individual elders' rooms, you're actually mitigating a lot of your issues around access to the meds. So yeah, can a cabinet get broken into? Sure it can. Can a med cart get broken into? Sure it can. But a med cart's going to have a lot more there for them than the individual cabinets.
Thanks. Yeah, so again, getting real, we're building that case for change. We're trying to think of all the things that we know about the med administration process. And then the last one is, med errors. Are you looking, with your current med cart system, what is your med error rate, and what are the most likely reasons or things that happen that end up being a med error? And Steve, you guys have done some research on med error rates.
Yeah, Meadowbrook Care Facility in Michigan that we worked with 1 year after implementing their cabinets, they saw over a 11% reduction in their med errors, and they were very, very pleased about that. Just the idea, they loved the idea that Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Smith and their meds aren't all in the same cart, and that a mistake could be made where they're individually placed in each of the elders' rooms.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really want to emphasize that if you're getting real and you're looking at med errors, just really talk to people and make sure you're getting accurate information. Because just because somebody hasn't reported a med error doesn't mean you haven't had some really close near misses that aren't getting reported. So always be aware of that. The near misses technically are a potential med error that needs to be shared, but sometimes that doesn't happen depending on your culture and your organization. So med error rates. So those are kind of the things that we think are important for whoever's kind of leading the charge to get rid of the med cart. These are some things you guys want to first kind of formulate in your heads. And now we're going to move on to the next letter in the growth model, which is the R, the reach out. So this is where you're now going to take all of your findings and you're going to go out and talk to other people that have their fingers on the pulse of the process. They're in the mix with it, and you're going to talk to them about what they're experiencing. Share your ideas, listen to theirs, and together formulate the bigger plan, the bigger picture of what's going on. So one of the first things we put down there was you need to engage a lot of different people. So Team Step Haven, do you want to kind of speak to the different people, stakeholders that you think are a part of the process that should be included in the conversation?
Yes, we had several of our meetings with others. We met with pharmacy and with our IOP group. We met with the pharmacist consultant, the pharmacy tech. We talked to our doctors. We talked to a lot of different people. And before we even did this. In fact, we're located near Cincinnati, Ohio. Our administrator and our director of nursing at the time went to Kansas and saw Eden Alternative Home there, and to see what they had and find out their process. So yeah, it's good to engage others. We wish we would have engaged our nurses more. They're the ones who are using it every day, and unfortunately we didn't include them enough, and we met with a lot of resistance. So that's one key piece.
Yeah, lots of good conversations going on. And Steve, anything you want to add from your experience working with providers about engaging a larger audience?
Yeah, I think one of the things that some of the communities that we've worked at with have done is they've actually held a little fair where they bring everyone together and bring the products that they're looking at and the solutions, and having a medication fair. So the vendors can be there with their different solutions, and you can get everyone involved with the selection of those solutions, and it creates a lot of questions, and it helps everyone get a real understanding of what they're trying, what the, if it's being pushed from the top down, what management is trying to achieve. So have the decision as a full community, these decisions, and not being, have the feeling that you're being dictated to.
There we go. Yeah, I agree. I think the more people that you get involved in the conversation, including the people that live there and their families, so that everybody kind of understands and can bring their perspective. Oh, well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Because it's really good to have that conversation. Because then you've got more people engaged, and you can find your champions. You can find your people who are willing to own the process and take the lead on it. And then you don't have to push. You are all moving together, and it's really nice. So that we think is like reaching out is like, ooh, who do we need to engage in this conversation, and how will we do that? And then the second thing we have down is really checking your state and federal regulations. And Steve, you've indicated that there's been some hiccups a little along the way to just paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, each state is different when it comes to the med cabinets. One of the facilities we worked with, communities we worked with down in South Carolina, they implemented, they thought this great community model, and loved what they were doing with this new community. And when they went and got to their actual licensing stage, so they're going through and looking at it, they never contacted anybody, and the license providers and the government officials were coming through, and they were saying, you haven't, they hadn't documented it properly of how their processes was changing from that medication, because they wanted to see their actual documentation. Okay, you've gone from a med cart solution to a in-room solution. How is that? Show me your documentation. Show me how you are training your people on this. And they did not have that. So it was it slowed down their actual opening. So that is something, do your research, call your different states, licensing areas around medications, and find out what you need. And that sort of goes to that second point when it comes to lighting. Each state, again, is different on the lighting requirements. If you're Most of the time, the architects are aware of what is necessary. If it's a new build or a renovation, they're going to be aware of it. But there's certain lumens that need to be in certain states. You have to be a certain candle power when you're doing your med prep. So what we've been doing a lot of is actually providing motion sensitive lights within the cabinets that are rechargeable, that last for like 3 months. So when the door is opened on the cabinet, this light turns on. It's LED. LEDs are great, and it illuminates the entire prep area, and they can do their prep. They're within their candle power or lumens that they need, and when the door closes of the cabinet, the light turns off and they go on. They keep extra, the facilities that we've worked with, they've kept extra lights charged up in various areas, so if one does go down, they can swap it out.
Very nice. Very nice. And I think Team Semhaven, you said last week that you kind of had to engage with a group that most people wouldn't think about engaging with when you started to put meds in the elders' rooms. And they actually came out and spent time with you. Do you want to share anything about that?
Oh, yes. The Board of Pharmacy for Ohio came out and spent 2 long days with us. And I think it was a 10-page report when she was finished, because we were one of the first homes in Ohio that went electronic and had the medications in the rooms. So it was quite an ordeal, but we were glad that she came out, and she was very nice and helpful. But yeah, it took us a while to, figure out all the bugs, and, we had to have a policy for our med pass times. We had to make sure that all of the medications were secure. We had to show her how we were going to make sure that they were secure. We had to show her how we were going to securely do our initials on the MAR and narcotic sheets and things like that. So it was interesting, and the lighting was a big issue with us, because as we were putting the medications in the rooms, we noticed that it was too dark when you open up the cabinets to look and see what's in there. So we had to go back and add lighting to above. We put them above the cabinets. So that's definitely, I like Steve's idea of having the automatic light. That's awesome. Because, I did a med pass yesterday on one of the households that I don't know all the elders, but going in their rooms, and I don't know the layout of their rooms, because since we did add on, the room configurations are all different. So it was, it's nice to have the little switch right inside the door that turns the light on above the cabinet, so I can find it and get their medications out. So it was great.
Nice.
There's also the color of the inside of the cabinet can have quite an effect on that entire work area. We've had so many communities ask us to match the outside laminate just from an aesthetic perspective. So they'll have a dark wood cabinet, and they put the dark wood on the inside, and they get it and they realize what a mistake that is, because we always recommend white on the inside, because it helps with the overall lighting, as well as if you drop something. And pills, there's very few medications that are the bright white that you're going to have as your background, but there's all sorts of different colors. And if you have a dark background, it's possible to actually lose something or miss, not see it against that dark background.
Nice. All right, I'm watching time, you guys, so I'm going to step up the pace just a little bit so we get through this for everybody. So narcotic storage. So Team Semhaven, you said workstation on wheels was your solution to the storage of narcotics. Anything you want to add about the conversation around that, or what kind of led you to that workstation on wheels? Or because there's all kinds of different right answers for storing narcotics.
Yes, we didn't know what we were going to do with our narcotics. We wanted to have them in the residents' rooms, but that meant that the nurses would have to go room to room and count narcotics at the end of each shift. And that's not what the goal was. The goal was to save time so that the nurses can spend more time with the elders. So that's why they are on the workstation on wheels, and we had to add a second lock to the workstation on wheels because it did lock, but they have to be double locked. So that was another issue that we had to work through, and we did, and it's great. It's working out fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, what makes the most sense. So that's why get real. Let's have some conversation. What are some of the right answers? Because there's a lot of right answers. I've heard a lot of right answers. Yours is one. But there are others as well, and I'm sure, Steve, you have many of them. But Steve, you brought up an interesting thing when we were talking last week about the new kind of self-medication thing we got going on with legal marijuana. Do you want to kind of speak to that a little bit too?
Yeah, so I deal both in Canada and the US, and I'm actually in Canada right now. That's where I live. And we've been getting a lot of inquiries regarding storage of elder-owned marijuana, and having a secure area within the residence, the elder's room, to house their own self-administered medications, like marijuana products. So having we've done a couple new designs for a couple communities where the med cabinet is a double lock, so there's one door that's locked for use of the care partner, and another smaller door which is locked for use of the actual elder.
There we go. So I should have said medical marijuana because that's kind of what you're probably going to run into more than likely. But yeah, CBD, those kinds of things, they are available, and you have to think about how you secure those. But even so, I'd also say we try to work toward more self-administration of medications, because just because somebody changes geography doesn't mean they can't administer at least some of their medications. So even that kind of a separate locks that the elder themselves could get into, if they're self-administering any of their medications, that may be important too. So it's not just the medical marijuana products, but something to think about. And then the medication exchange process, because I find that most people want to exchange meds at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night when somebody's trying to sleep, and now the medications are in the room. So why would we want to talk about this? Steve, I think you were going to.
Yeah, it really comes down to the location in the elder's room where that where that med cabinet is going to be. So are you most of the communities that we're dealing with right now are looking at the entranceway. So they walk in the door and the unit is right there. So I can actually share my screen and show you one of those units right now. So this is a community in the Carolinas where they had a cabinet put into the elder's room, and this is just walking in. It's on the left-hand side when they walk in, and they have full access. They wanted everything to match. But when they go in to stock it, it is at night. They're not disturbing the elders whose bed is right around the corner there. So it makes it a lot easier for them to do that actual stocking.
Very nice. Yeah. So again, this is something to get real about. Reach out, talk to people. How are we exchanging? Do we want to try for a different time of day? What would that look like? What would be some of the complicating factors about that? And the same thing with removing discontinued medication, so that doctors come and decided don't need that medication anymore. And Team Semhaven, you guys had to create a process around that, right?
I think one of the things that our supervisors handle all of the physician communication, and they put out a email about all their communication. That's one way that we can look at the orders have been written, medications have been discontinued. We contact the families using that list, and so we can white out, or not white out, but highlight out when that's done. So somebody can go and get that medication out of the medicine cabinet and reduce the likelihood that somebody, might use that or try to give that med when there's no current order.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thinking through that process too, and getting people engaged and thinking that through. And then there's the whole infection control thing. So Steve, talk to us a little bit about the difference between a med cabinet versus a med cart.
Yeah, I mean, in any community, there's always a concern when a bug starts going around that all the elders have the potential of getting it, as well as just infection control practices. In many different settings where carts are being used, specifically medication carts, the CDC specifically talks about the med cart being cleaned and disinfected when it goes from room to room. Now, I know they stay out in the hallways normally, but they do go into community areas. There's interactions between a care partner and an elder where there is skin contact, where now you're touching the med cart's going to the next room, you're touching, and that disinfection that should be happening of that med cart, I would ask everyone, how often are you actually disinfecting your med cart? The in-room solutions does create, if we're utilizing proper hand washing protocols, and that with every time you go into a different room, you're using either sanitizing or hand washing, you are minimizing that the chance of contaminating an area and then it traveling around. So that in-room solution is generally a lot cleaner solution. And we actually just recently did a swabbing study. I have a microbiology background, and it was more of an institutional setting, but we found some alarming bugs on some surfaces, even though they were utilizing proper hand washing protocols.
Yeah, so just always thinking about that. And then I think the last one in the reach out is just thinking about, as Team Semhaven did say, who's already got it in place that's close by, that we could go visit, we could go find what worked and what didn't work, and who do we want to send, who's the most important to go and experience this, how are they going to bring it back, what questions do we want to ask them, what things do we want to make sure that we observe while we're there. So that's all part of reaching out. So I want to check back in with Jane before we move on to Open Up and Dream. And just see, Jane, are we giving you some answers as to why it seems incongruent to have meds in the elders' rooms and still have a cart you're kind of pushing around, but are we kind of getting you the answers that you need? And you can just type in the QA box and let me know. I'm hoping we're getting to that for you. Again, it just depends on where you're at, depends on where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. And that will determine whether or not you need that second cart. Ideally, no other cart is needed, but there's a lot of work and a lot of questions to answer to get there. So we've gotten real with whoever's kind of championing the journey. They've reached out, engaged a lot of other people, looked a little bit more broadly at the medication administration process. And now it's time for the O part of the growth model, which is Open Up and Dream. So you've got these people you've already engaged. Some of them, or maybe all of them, are going to want to be involved in just really looking at what our dreams are. What companies are available to reach out to regarding medication cabinets? Well, that's a really great question, Cody, because you are meeting Steve Reinecke from Proximity Systems, and as you can see, that is part of what they do. Team Semhaven, I think you used a local company, right? So you found a local company. I've heard some people that just find, woodworkers in their area. Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for and how state-of-the-art you want to get, but I recommend you find the right fit for you, because I think that is super important. All right, so one of the first things we put under opening up and dreaming is asking the big question, which is, does this really align with our goals around creating home? And Team Semhaven, it seems like that was kind of a question that you guys explored early on.
Yeah, I don't want to be redundant because I think we've kind of covered this in mind, but I did want to say that that was probably a big motivation because we were making other changes as well, and we felt that it was important to do, and I think that I don't think there's a reason to do it if it doesn't align with your goals. You know, we stated a lot of different reasons for why it works, but it's something that I think you have to believe that it's going to help.
Yeah, yeah. And I think being able to explain that to people is really important. And then again, does it align with our quality of life and quality of care that we desire to have for the elders and as well as the employees that are there? And so how does, again, we're building that case for change, we're dreaming, so we've got to be able to explain how these stars all align and all these dots connect, and how it makes sense. And that's super important for leaders to do, and not just make it, oh, another thing they're asking us to change, but really help explain how this is really going to lead to a better quality of life for everybody involved. And then dreaming about the flow of the day. This is one of the things that we did a lot. We didn't actually get to action, I am sorry to say, but we did a lot of dreaming. And we did talk about, you know, what would make for a really good flow of the day, you know? Oh, you know, we're going to have natural awakening. And so whoever's helping me get up in the morning, they're all cross-trained as med aides. And so we dreamed that they would come in, and as part of getting you up and getting you ready to go to breakfast and get about your day, they would just help you take your medications. And then you would just go about your day, and maybe if you had one or two other odd times that you got medications, they figured out the flow of when to work with you based on you, the elder, how you wanted your day to flow, when we would connect with you to get those other medications in. And then the same thing happened at the end of the day when you said, I'm tired, I'm ready for bed. Whoever's going to be there to support you or help you is in there with you. And part of that whole process is any medications you need to take as you go to bed, that just flows into the day. And they just make that work. And it doesn't matter if your awakening time is 11 o'clock at night or your awakening time is 7 o'clock in the morning. They just went with the flow. And that's what we dreamed, is to how to make that and make it work. And so now it feels much more natural. There's no morning road rage. There's no, let's get everybody to bed by 7 o'clock because we got other things to do. And it just really worked. We thought it was going to work really nice. And you heard Team Semhaven's story last week, and I think for them that it worked beautifully, that they were able to do that. And then we've already kind of talked about, you know, where do you want to put the med cabinets? Are they going to be right in the doorway? Are they going to be in a bathroom, which Steve has told me that actually causes some challenges, right? Steve, you said sometimes having the med cabinets in the bathrooms can be a challenge, right?
Oh yeah, because just from a overall moisture perspective, you don't want to have your meds exposed. Now, a lot of them are sealed up, but there's ones that aren't. But as well as you know, you might have to disturb someone in that bathroom to get to their meds. In a lot of these communities, the bathroom is a very personal place, and having a care partner going into the bathroom can seem like a little bit of a disturbance and a privacy issue.
Thank you. Yeah. So really think about it. Even if you want to put it outside the door, you know, just really think about what's the most logical place for us to put this, so it's not like in your face medication kind of stuff, but yet it isn't disturbing the flow of the elder's day or their good night's sleep. So you'll want to be dreaming and talking about different places you might put it, and maybe even practicing, as Steve said, mocking it out and kind of figuring out what that might look like. And then the locking system is something to talk about. And Steve, you've already kind of talked about electronic versus keyed locks. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, just you know, a lot of these locking systems have key fob access as well. So if you don't want to be punching in if you still like the idea of you know, centrally located things like a key, but you can go with a key fob solution and have different fobs for different areas within the community. So you might have a certain section associated with one key fob, but you can still have an administration key fob that can override all the cabinets. So there's going to be more and more intelligence coming with these locking systems, and I really envision a locking system that's going to be a smart lock that for the communities that are doing a lot of self-administration, that when you're self-administering your medications, and let's say grandma's supposed to be taking her meds at 2 p.m. and the cabinet door doesn't open by 3, we can send an alert out to a caregiver that, you know, that the meds aren't actually being used, and start to look at how often that's actually happening.
Oh, wow. So that would work with self-administration as well. If the elder was taking their own meds, but they hadn't actually opened the cabinet to take them in their own room. Okay, cool. See, I learned something new. That's great. All right. And then the cabinet, the cabinet design, being able to store the things that need to be stored, and dreaming about, you know, just what's the possibility, not only what do we need today, but what might we need in the future. And Steve, you've got some unique ways at Proximity Solutions that you kind of meet those needs.
Yeah, we have standard designs, and in the past 3 years, I haven't sold one because everyone's constantly doing some sort of configuration. Plus the aesthetic nature. If these communities, when they go to in-room medication solutions, they want something that blends in. They don't want it to look institutional. And a lot of the solutions out there are very institutional, and, you know, or metal. So we, you know, getting it customized and matching finishes, plus taking into consideration all the different other things that you want to store within the elder's room. There might be supplies, there might be not just meds, and can we do that all in one sort of workstation? And I can share one of those pictures I shared just early. So this unit here was a unit we did for a community called Harmony Village, and they wanted their supplies as well as their meds in one solution. So having the meds up top under a electronic lock, but the other supplies not being locked and still having access by the elder.
Nice, thank you. And then dreaming, we're still dreaming. So dreaming about what does the medication aide or nurse do with her extra time, because we're going to save her some time. So I don't know, Team Semhaven, what's been your journey with that?
All of our people that live here get extra attention because the nurses all have extra time. The caregivers have extra time to do buddy visits, visiting with them. We have one nurse that said she missed her calling because when she's here, the elders that she gives the medications to also have their hair done. She'll curl their hair or, you know, do things like that. She didn't have time to do that before, you know, so it does free up time. And it's so nice to see our elders being so happy.
Very nice, very nice. But I can hear that can feel very scary.
Yes, it can. It can feel scary because you have this extra time. Are they going to think that, oh, gee, she's just doing somebody's hair, she has time to do something else? But no, the elders will show you how happy they are and how worthwhile the extra minute or two that you're spending with them is so worth it. Just to make a smile on their face. They may not need that antidepressant anymore or anti-anxiety because they're happy, because you're spending time with them.
Yep. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. I love it.
To what Connie said, our job descriptions were universal caregiver partners. So no matter, it's whatever needs to be done is going to be done. So my job description is so broad now that it's really trying to fulfill unmet needs. That would be 25 words or less of your job description. So with that culture or that environment that you have, I think it's less likely. Yes, there's always going to be some people that want to be task oriented or want to be clinical or want to judge what task you're doing. But I think that gives us the permission to be able to do it. And as long as we as leaders continue to allow that, give that permission, I think people will find ways to be creative and double their satisfaction.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So let's move in. So we've dreamed. So we built our case for change. We've got people engaged. We've done our dreaming. Now we need to get into the nitty gritty, the plan that's going to move us from where we are to where we want to be. So one of the things that we can think about when we start working up the plan is, again, are we going to stick with strict time limits on when we're going to give medications, or are we going to start to open that up? And so the team at Semhaven has talked about the idea that, yes, we opened it up, there's more time, we can go with the flow when the elder naturally awakens. And I find that that's one of those pebbles that you drop in the water, and a lot of other system changes start to happen when you start going with natural awakening. And this movement into meds in the elders' rooms is a perfect way to like drop that pebble and start really changing things. The other thing as Steve talked about, are there infection control issues that we need to be mindful of as we put in this new process? And like hand washing, sanitizing, I assume that that's all in place, but that might be something to just reinforce and double check. The pill crushers. I know everybody has pill crushers around. So Team Semhaven, what did you do about the pill crusher thing?
We used the Silent Night, which is awesome. We love it because it doesn't make a lot of noise when you're crushing the medications, unless the nurses think they need to make that noise. Anyways, that's why they call it Silent Night. But it's great. It's awesome. But they are a little pricey. So we just have one per household. And so if someone's medications need to be crushed, that's why we have the workstation, so that we can crush the medications there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is something that we have to think about because it depends on the elders. And so how many need to have their pills crushed, and what are we going to do? How many pill crushers are we going to need? What makes the most sense? I love the Silent Night. I think that's a really great one. Because it does really pulverize it, and it does not make the whole big noise. And I have had people talk about, when you're trying to do the hammer pill crusher, and then you've got it on a shelf that's kind of hanging there, pretty soon the shelf starts to get loose, and that's been one of the challenges I've had people say. So the Silent Night actually is a really great solution. And then updating, we talked before about the medication exchange and the discontinuation process. How are we going to do that? Because now we're in the nitty gritty. And we're just figuring that out, and we've got to make sure that that goes into our policies and updates our policies. Narcotic medication storage, we've already talked about that, the administration, the handoff process, the counts that need to happen throughout the day. How are we going to do that? What makes the most sense? Now let's put it into a plan of action. I'll make sure that gets updated in our process. And then I wanted to ask Team Semhaven, because then there's the whole other realm of reality, which is our stock supplies, our PRNs, the souffle cups, the water glasses, the supplemental drinks, the applesauce that we're going to put the crush meds in, the glucometer so we can test their blood sugars before we give them insulin, and where are we going to store the insulin? And then there's the blood pressure cups and the stethoscopes and the insulin syringes. So tell us a little bit about your journey and your plan of action with all of that. Holy cow.
Well, when we got our workstation on wheels, we didn't anticipate all the things we have to carry or that we needed to move over. So part of it was problem solving, coming creatively with different solutions. We had baskets that we actually hooked on to our cart on wheels, and we used what are those things called? Zip ties and baskets, wire baskets. We tried to minimize the number of things like the paper goods and stuff that we put on the cart because we're constantly refilling that supply, but do we need a gazillion of them on at one time? We had come from a culture where we overstocked because we wanted that next nurse to be able to have what they needed without having. So we kind of looked at what we put on the cart, but we realized that there were probably things we needed to be on there. So that's why we dealt with it. But I don't think we dealt with that until after we got the cart.
Okay.
Or the workstation on wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. So that stuff is all a challenge. And Steve, you have had some innovative ways that people have worked around those kinds of issues.
Oh yeah, just the little things like gloves and tissues, and having them easily accessible, and not having to have them on a cart and go around, but have them accessible within the room so that the cabinet doesn't need to be actually opened. So having cutouts where the gloves and the and or tissues can be accessed, and also adult briefs. We dealt with one community where they wanted an adult briefs dispenser that blended into the environment, so it looked like a little piece of furniture, and as well as a cabinet for their meds, and we brought it together into one cabinet that housed both, and it did go into the into the elder's bathroom, but it combined everything quite nicely, and there wasn't a clutter. One thing I've heard from many of the events that I've gone to over the years is the hoarding of adult briefs, and opening up cabinets within elder rooms and finding suddenly there's 3 packages, and why does there need to be 3 packages in there? So to be able to deal with that stocking situation a little bit better.
Nice. And yeah, you can totally store some of the supplies you need into the cabinets, depending, that's part of your thinking about what size cabinets do we need, what could of all that stuff could be stored there. Hopefully the elders already have a water pitcher and a glass in their room. And so you've already got that there and that kind of stuff. So just really thinking through that whole process. And then the outlier meds, so what are the meds, that you don't give when they wake up and you don't give when they go to bed, but they fall other times of the day. And you'll want to work up a plan around that. And Team Semhaven, any wisdom you have about those?
I think that when you give medications to the elders, they want them when they want them. And it's difficult to change their mind, and we shouldn't have to change their mind unless it's beneficial for them or safe for them. So we give them when they want them, and we give them because the Board of Pharmacy said we have to have specific time frames. We broadened those time frames. So morning time could be, between 7, 8, and 9, but then you have an hour before and an hour after. So really that's like a 4.5, 5 hour time frame that we can give them. And that works out real well for us. Yeah.
So really opening up that time. Yeah. Beautiful.
The time frames. Yeah.
Very good. And so, you would just get to know, who are the folks that have those in between medication times, and then just work that's now your new flow, is to pick those up with the right time. My guess is they are not the majority, but rather the minority. Would that be true? Yeah, they're shaking their heads, yes. Okay. And Steve, you talked before about trialing the system, and it sounds like at Proximity, you guys do send out demonstration cabinets for people to try out. Is there anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, just don't be afraid to try different vendors, and I think most vendors should be fairly open to sending a sample cabinet to actually trial. And there's a few companies out there.
Okay, yeah. So ask. That may be part of your decision-making process. And then self-administration, I've already mentioned. I'm a big advocate for that. So how would you continue to facilitate that with med cabinets in the room, and what would that look like? And that's part of your plan. And then I think part of your plan is also to think about, if we do this and it infects this, what other systems will need to change. So again, if you're going to do more natural awakening and meds are given when somebody's awakening, does that mean you still want a 7:30 to 8:30 breakfast time, or do we need to broaden breakfast time, or do we need to have a continental breakfast available so those who get up early that need a little food with their pills can get some food in their neighborhood or close to their room, and then still go down to a bigger breakfast. So you got to think about all those systems and the delivery of laundry and just all kinds of things that can be impacted by making this kind of a change. And then your measures of success. So how will you know that this is really achieving your vision and making it happen? And Steve, I think you've got several organizations that really have done good measurements.
Yes, yeah, just looking at the medication errors, one of the communities that I dealt with, and this is a direct quote from their director. She said, providing the in-room medication supply storage has helped us secure one of the lowest employer turnover rates compared to the industry standards while providing a more personalized approach. So they actually, and it wasn't something that they thought they were going to get out of it, but they actually reduced their turnover of their employees within their community, because everyone felt that they were, people go into this industry to deliver care and not to administrate. And if they can feel that they're actually providing their care, they're going to be your employee, satisfaction scores are going to go up.
Nice. I wouldn't have figured that. So that's a good one. Any other measures of success, Team Semhaven, that you would add? Anything, any kind of surprises in terms of outcomes from this that you would share?
Yeah, I think that if you look at how the MedPass is, and you look at what we used to do, and it's been, 15, 16 years for us since the medications have been in the rooms. It's a big difference. I went and visited a facility that I used to work at, and they still have the big med cart for 20 people. And I was talking to the nurse, and she was leaning on the med cart as we were speaking, and I felt like there was a disconnect there, because you have this huge med cart, and she's on one side and I'm on the other. It's like a barrier. Whereas here, you have the nurse. We do have the workstation on wheels, which is technically a cart, but it's so small that you still have that camaraderie with our elders. It's there. It's not a block between them and us.
Nice.
Just something there.
One thing I wanted to add, I said, I don't know that we have any formal studies, but I think we get a lot of our information about satisfaction from elders, family, speaking one-on-one or in care conference. I think just increases autonomy, because they're having more say in where in the medication process that where they want it, when they want it. The delivery. We don't always administer the medication in the room, but that's where it's stored.
Okay. And that actually feeds into a question we have right now, which is, and I would love to answer this before we get into the last two, and then we really got a book. But any worries about isolation or an elder feeling like they're stuck waiting in their room for somebody to arrive and give them medications versus them being out about in the community and either going to find the med cart and the nurse and get their medications or something like that. Are you finding that ever happens?
No, we don't find that happening here, because we do have several of our elders that like to take their medicine while they're sitting at the table. Think about it. At home, a lot of us take our medications after we eat breakfast. I get my medicine ready, and then I sit it at the table, and then I'll take it when I'm done eating. And so a lot of them want them, I'll take it when I'm done eating. I noticed that yesterday I had a lady who I went in and I was talking to her. She had just gotten up and was getting ready to go to breakfast. And I said, how do you want to take your medication? She goes, I take it in the dining room and I want you to bring it to me. So, you know, it's nice because then you go and get their medicine and you take it to them and you have that extra time again to spend. So they don't have to wait in their room for their medication. It's where they're used to taking it.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds very person directed, which is kind of where we're headed with all of this. Is really making it be part of the elders' lives. All right, so let's just go through the next letter in the growth model is the T. So like, got a plan. Now we got to take action. So the first one is, you know, where do we start? Are we going to do a whole neighborhood? Are we going to do just a couple rooms? Are we just going to start with one elder and just see how that goes? Who's going to do what by when? So what's our action plan look like? And how often are we going to check in on that and make adjustments? Because like not everything's going to go smoothly. We're going to realize that we didn't talk about something that needed to be talked about. So, you know, how do we do the whole feedback and adjustment and who needs to be involved in that? And if we come up with a barrier that we didn't expect and like all of a sudden, woof, we got a problem, you know, how are we going to identify it and bust that? And again, who needs to be involved in that? And then updating policies and procedures. Team Semhaven, do you remember how long did it take for you to like update all your policies and procedures around the med administration process?
It really wasn't that difficult. We came up with our medication timeframes for the Board of Pharmacy to make them happy. And then it was, you know, the medications are in their rooms. It's, you know, that's how it is.
That's how it is.
Yeah. And you know, we started out one household at a time. We started out with Ripple Ridge, actually, which is home to 20. And it went well. Our IT person made sure that our electronic charting system was working down the hallway because there was, you know, their long hallway. Some of the elders' rooms are way down at the end, and you know, so we were concerned that, you know, do we have enough access points for our computer?
Sure, yeah.
So that worked out well, but it's trial and error. You know, you have to start small. You can't just say, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to start tomorrow and it's all going to go great. So small little successes, and we were happy.
There we go. I love it. I love it. And then you know, the nurse, the med nurse who's been chained to that med cart for hours and hours all day long. She really needs to be supported. I have heard over and over again that is just a big challenge to get a new mindset about what is my role on the team, because I've been so attached to this med cart, and now I have time to be more engaged with the elders and do more things and help my team out. And it's going to feel awkward. And so helping them through that is super important as you're taking action. Measurements, we talked already, you know, what would you measure? How are you going to know if you're successful? And making sure you're tracking those, both the quantitative, the things you can measure, but also the qualitative, how it's changing people's quality of life. And one of the things I've heard people tell me is that when that med cart disappears, and I also mean the med dresser that's in the living room, really when that is gone, that they find the elders spend less time ruminating on their aches and their pains and ask for fewer PRNs, fewer requests to be seen by the doctor because they've got some symptom, and all that kind of anxiety tends to kind of melt away. And so I thought that was a really interesting outcome I would not necessarily have expected. And then I don't know, Team Semhaven, is there any lessons learned through the implementation process that helped you with other change processes that you've been making on your journey?
Yes, including the nurses is number one. I know I keep saying it, but it's true. And that's not only with the medication cart, medications in the rooms, but also anything else that you want to start, because you got to start where the care is being given.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
Nice.
That comes even before talking about the cost or anything like that. It's what they need, what they want, and you're going to have better success, and you won't go back if your nurses are on board.
Thank you. Thank you. So that actually answers our next part of the model, which is the H. How do we hold steady so we don't go backwards? And so again, bringing the people that are most closely attached to this process, into that can make them the people that help monitor and make sure that there isn't that temptation to, well, let's get a little bit bigger than the workstation on wheels. Well, we need a little bit more space. Well, let's just, because I've seen that happen even with the greenhouse model. I have seen that happen, that starts to creep back in. And so just really when you're thinking about how do we hold steady, how do we make sure that we don't start building up the number of medications and starting to need that med card again? How are we going to educate new employees, residents, families about this process so that they step right in and keep it going? And Team Semhaven, I don't know if you have any experience with this, anything you want to add there? Celia, we can't hear you.
I'm getting weary.
I understand.
I see new employees as a part of my role here. And we're very unique in our area and have been for a while. And that's something that I think that takes a bit of adjustment on their part. And I think they need support to kind of integrate that into their way of thinking. And so I think that's one of the big roles that we have as their peers, to kind of help them and let them know that that's an adjustment, and to not be afraid to verbalize the need for help.
Yeah. I think if for somebody, if they've come from the MedCart system and now they're coming into your system, it would take some time for them to find the new way of doing things. And then the other thing I hear, because I said, maybe this is an opportunity to reduce overall medication use or the number of med passes, is that with new elders coming in, that can start to creep back up. And so I think it's really important that part of your holding steady is, as we get new elders in, how are we going to make sure that we've optimized their medication use and their med passes so we keep our system intact and we don't start creeping back up on the number of medications. And it's tough. It's really tough. You have to be kind of hyper vigilant on that. And then the last one is, other systems and processes that might need to change. We talked about the team and us. We're talking, we're like, okay, Steve, you mentioned the adult briefs. So is that something we want to also start storing in the room? Well, this might be a good time to do that. And how can we modify the system to be doing some other things, and that we've been having carts sitting out in the hall with and stuff like that. I even know some communities that have gotten rid of the housekeeping cart. Pretty darn cool. So what are some other ways we can start getting rid of some of those institutional trappings and spread this even further along? So we are like 5 minutes from our end time, actually 3 minutes from our end time, and we talked a lot. Somebody said there's a hybrid solution, sounds complicated. Can you help with the logistics? So now the meds are in the apartment, but the resident wants the meds in the dining room. The nurse med tech will be walking back and forth from each of those apartments for each resident who wants their meds in the dining room. I don't know, Team Semhaven, do you have any? I mean, you have households, so it's not like it's a whole lot of steps, but talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually, I thought at first, I was kind of a naysayer as well, saying that we'll be going back and forth, but I don't do a med pass very often because I'm a nurse leader, and unless the nurse calls off or whatever, I don't do it. And I don't see me going back and forth. I go and talk to them. I find out, sometimes I'll get a report and they'll say, so-and-so likes their medication at the table, so-and-so likes theirs when they first get up and they're still in their room. So I'm doing the med pass, but I'm not going to fix their, I don't feel like I'm a pill pusher. I feel like I'm part of their life, and I'm giving them what they need and what they want. And I'm not going back and forth. I'm getting their medicines as I see them. I don't go in and wake them up and say, here's your pills, wake up, I'll hold your head. That's not how it goes anymore. That's not how you do it at home. Right. That's not how you should do it here in their home.
Absolutely. And I think if we go back to the reach out, the first question we had under reach out, which is how are we going to effectively engage, you'll see that the residents and the family members are part of that discussion. So it may be an education piece that you do before you even get started on this, is to say, what do you guys think about if your meds are in only your meds are in your room, and we would really love to just give them to you as you get up in the morning, and find out, is 90% of them going to say we want them in the dining room, or 90% going to say they want them in their own room in private, and then they can ask the nurse questions and talk about it. Or would they rather have this whole souffle cup of meds in front of everybody else at the table? And they have those conversations and see what their feelings are. And then you're trialing it out. So they're part of the trial process too, and looking at how this might feel. And so even though today you might ask them, and you might see them all taking them in their room, in the dining room, is that because we've kind of built that habit for them, or is it because they've really had some time to think about it and make a choice? Did anyone answer the question about refrigerated medications? No, I didn't see a question about that, Cody, but let's ask. So insulins. Do you guys have any advice about how you work with insulin for somebody when you've got the med cabinets in the room? I know that's not the only refrigerated med, but that's one of them. Connie or Celia or Steve, have you seen anything?
Yeah, I still see a for the refrigerated meds, there's still a centralized area where they are dealing with those. It has to. They're not doing that individually in each of the rooms that I've seen.
Okay. Okay. So I know we need to do the CEU. So the other thing that I would say, again, as a pharmacist, I'm all about reducing unnecessary medication use, reducing unnecessary medication times. So one of the things I would say is, can you get them down to a once-a-day dose of a longer acting insulin, so that you are only doing that once a day versus regular insulin or something that you have to give multiple times a day? And how could you simplify that process? But yes, you still need to store it in a refrigerator. But again, does that refrigerator have to be in this room that's 30,000 feet away? Or can you put a refrigerator in a more closer location to those elders' rooms and make it an easy grab for the nurses? I know it needs to be locked and all that kind of stuff, but hopefully, Cody, that gives you guys some answers. Laura, I'm gonna, most insulin is stable. Look at this, I love this. Most insulin is stable at room temperature for 28 days. Thank you. Thank you. That didn't even go into my head. So I appreciate anonymous attendee for doing that. All right, so Laura, you need to do the CEUs, and then we can totally stay on. If there's more questions, put them in the Q&A box.
I love that we're ending on a mysterious note with the anonymous attendee. With that, I want to just call attention to the fact that I did put a note out to all of the participants on the system here, giving you the contact information for Steve Reinecke at Proximity Systems. If you do want to connect with someone and chat and talk about cabinet systems, etc., we highly recommend their work. So that said, I am going to put the CEU information up on the screen, and you might want to take notes. Here we go. You will be sending an email to kwood@edenalt.org, KWOOD @edenalt.org. We will only be receiving and accepting email requests. Please don't call. Please email only to that address, and do so by May 15th. The subject line should read CEUs for Home is Where the Med Cart Isn't Part 2. You do need to distinguish between Part 1 and Part 2, because you should have already done the reach out for Part 1 last week, and they are managed separately in the CEU system. You're going to say that you participated start to finish on May 1st. And the most important part of your outreach is to put your code phrase in the body of your email. And this week, it is different than last week. This week, it's meds are a personal matter. And I'm going to say it again, meds are a personal matter. So those are the instructions for asking for and locking in your CEUs. I'm going to go ahead and take them down from the screen, and thank you so much for joining us. Denise, any final words?
No, except find us. If you have questions, don't hesitate to email me or Laura, and we would be happy to reach out to our faculty and get you other questions answered. But we hope you will get rid of med cards and put the meds in the elders' rooms. It's awesome. It's an awesome change.
Oh, I love ending on that note. Thank you. Have a great evening.